Hi there, welcome to today's video. Today is my October Halloween horror bullet journal setup. And this was a horror to set up for sure. I'm Natasha of Natasha Miller Creates, and I am getting my bullet journal ready for October. I am a week behind, and I really felt it. This week has been super crazy busy, and I really did miss having my journal, so I've actually been using scraps of paper to keep track of everything. So I was super slow on this setup. This setup turned into a bit of a monster, no pun intended, for Halloween, but I basically overthought everything, or at least overestimated my abilities to get things done in a timely manner. So my theme for October for Halloween is killer clowns at a dark carnival. And I was super excited. The first hiccup happened. I was going to use stamps initially to do this when I realized the stamps were going to be more effort than I had time for. And the irony in that is this was about 4 weeks ago when I made this decision. And instead I decided I was going to draw clowns. Now, at this point in my creative journey, I don't know how to draw people. So here I am deciding that I'm going to draw some clowns, and I don't have enough time to use stamps, so I will just draw people. So I should have known then, that was probably the first red flag, that the setup was going to be a little bit of a disaster, but here we are. So I decided to lean into the killer clown theme, and I drew my clowns, which they actually came out really good. I was really happy with them. You'll see them later on in this video. And I also decided to do some stencils. A friend of mine asked if I could cut some stencils for her husband's company, and I was like, well, I've never done stencils before. I have a silhouette cameo, how hard could it be? Turns out not hard at all. Time consuming, a little bit, yes, but not hard. And so I decided to design a spiral stencil for this setup, which you will see. So right now I'm setting up the hand-lettered cover page as well as the month cover page. And I'm using my Distress Oxide inks to add the background. I'm using black soot and hickory smoke. And I'm just alternating between the two colors and kind of making the blend a little bit smoother. Turns out this didn't matter that much in the end, and you're gonna see why shortly. But for the left-hand side where I glued down my hand-lettered dashboard, I just did the outside since you don't see the middle. So that was fine. I didn't put as much effort into blending on the left-hand side as I did the right, even though looking at it now, it does look like a bit of a rough blend on the right-hand side. But again, you will see shortly that this doesn't matter. I have been neglectful of my YouTube channel over the last few weeks. Back to school has been a little bit rough. And then I caught the back to school flu or cold or whatever you want to call it, that then became bronchitis. So I've been really struggling the last 3 weeks. And today is honestly the first day where I actually feel a little bit human again. So I'm kind of happy to be back in this healthy space. I'm not 100% healthy yet, but I'm definitely healthier. And so I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel from this cough and just general yuckiness. So for my quote, I wanted to lean into the concept of fear and horror and all that stuff, but I also still wanted it to be relevant. So the quote I chose is, "Thinking will not overcome fear, but action will." Try and stay away from quotes that are overly cheesy, but I thought this one was the perfect balance between something that was relevant for an October Halloween theme and then something that was actually relevant to life experience. So drawing in my borders with my black Tombow brush pen, which I do every month. I used to do alternating colors or like something a little bit different, but no, I like the black, and it's consistent with everything I've done in my notebooks, I think now for years. So decided to stick with that. So initially when I designed this setup, I did a page where I had a peek through hole and a piece of vellum between two pages. So that's what you see me doing here. I'm actually cutting my tab into the second page, or the second part of the cover page. So the concept was the idea of walking through a clown's mouth, and then the clown's mouth opens up into this spiral vortex. I did my hand lettering in Procreate for the October, and I wanted it to be one of those like light up marquees that shows up over top of the clown's mouth, and to give it that carnival effect. And this is my clown's mouth, and you're gonna see I grab a craft knife and I cut out the center of the clown's mouth, and that's where I'm going to put the vellum behind the page. Is this step 100% necessary for this effect? Not really, but I thought it just added that little bit of extra at the time that I thought it needed. And so I just put a cutting board in between my two pages, and I'm just going in with a craft knife and cutting out around the clown's mouth. So I always draw my elements for my setups in Procreate prior to setting them up and filming the video. And that's just a timing thing. I used to draw more in my journal, and it's something I really want to get back to. I just need to be better about time management. I think, it's not even, or I guess the first week of October is only over now, but this month has been absolutely flying. So now I'm working on the clown mouth vortex piece that I briefly mentioned. I put my vellum in place with just a piece of washi, and I drew the outline of the clown's mouth so that I knew where I needed the center of my stencil to be. And this is the stencil that I designed specifically for this layout, which I have some plans to use it in some other pieces too now. So I'm happy I have it, and it was a good experience, and now I know I can cut stencils. So I'm using the black soot of the Distress Oxide on top of the vellum, and I'm just going in and adding in the color. I definitely added too much color, but that's fine. Too much color is not going to make a difference. Too little will, but too much is fine. And I'm just adding in the pieces. I should have taped the stencil down. That's something you can do if you're doing stencil work. If you tape it down with some washi, it'll be easier to use. I'm adding in my glue now to glue my first cover page to the vellum page, and I just left the washi there because it's going to be behind the page, so it didn't matter. And I'm just trimming down the white edge so that you have that black background consistently. So far everything was still going more or less smoothly. I'm coloring in my tab with a black acrylograph. I use the acrylographs to color in my tabs. I find it gives them a bit more weight and not as flimsy as if it were just paper. So I did a quick loose outline around my hand lettered cover page on the left hand side, and I thought it would be fun to add some detail to the piece by including a path. I'm using a grey acrylograph to color in the path. Had a bit of a run-in with a green acrylograph that I just used a tissue to spread the ink a little bit, and then things started hitting the fan. So this was the first mistake of many, and it was getting some green paint on my dashboard. Not a huge deal, but I still didn't like it. I designed some washi as part of my theme, and so I was able to cut out some of the purple to cover up the green splotchy paint. So if you have that option, that is great for covering up mistakes. Another great option would be to use paint or a paint pen, which is why I love paint pens so much, is they are great if you need to do a quick fix. So now I'm working on my calendar page. So this is where things started to go even more sideways than before. When I first decided on my initial design concept 4 weeks ago, I sketched out what I wanted the pages to look like, particularly the layout, the calendar layouts and the monthly layouts. But after I changed my mind on the theme and the design, I never went back to double check that the layouts I'd penciled in still made sense. So I started filming this, and I decided I was just going to lean into it and go with what was there. Well, it didn't work out. My initial design had the calendar surrounded by the marquee lights. Now, this is a lot more detail than I would normally include in a calendar layout, but since it's Halloween and October and it's always fun to set your journal up for this time of year, I thought it would be fine. I started putting pieces together and I had an idea of what I wanted this to look like, and it just wasn't coming to life. Like, what was in my head wasn't showing up on the page. I tried a bunch of different things, and while it was working like it should have worked, it wasn't what was in my mind and it wasn't how I wanted it to look. And so I did the unthinkable. I ripped the pages out of my notebook. It felt a little bit like a petulant child. I wasn't angry when I did it. I was frustrated, and mostly with myself, but it's definitely a bit more of an extreme take than I normally would do. Normally I would try and make it work or glue pages over, but I wasn't feeling it, and that was just it. Like I said, I haven't been feeling well, and so my tolerance for, I'm gonna say garbage, hasn't been very high, and so boom, I tore the pages out of my notebook. Now, when you're doing that, when you are tearing the pages out, what I do is I go to the page that it was attached to with the binding, and I just remove that page too. That way I don't risk losing that page because it doesn't have the partner, if you will. And that's what you saw me do earlier. You saw me take out the loose piece. As you can see, I have a much smoother blend on this page when I redid it. And I decided to keep it a lot more simple and not do the vellum in between. So again, you'll see what I did there. And then to reinforce the page just a little bit more, I have some black washi, and I use some black washi down the center of the notebook to make sure that the page would be secure and stay in place. So that's what you see me do here. You're gonna see that on the I want to say the opposite side of the page, but like where it sits in the binding, you'll see what I mean in a minute. I added white washi because I had the white background versus the black background. Having plain white and plain black washi is a must in my mind since it's great for situations like these. So I ended up taking out the vellum from the two pages that I tore out, and I cut the clown's mouth off of the page. I could have printed another one because I did end up printing a new October heading, so could have printed a new clown's mouth, but at the time I just wanted to get back on track and get this layout done so that I could use my journal, and so I just cut out the clown's mouth off of the previous page. So while the vellum swirl doesn't pop as much because now it's on the darker background versus the white background before, I still think it's fine. I still think it works. Now, I ended up liking the pathway that I had drawn before, and so I ended up adding that back in. Last time I used acrylographs, this time I just mixed up some paint just so that it would go a little bit faster. I did my gray paint for the gray pathway, and then I did some green paint for the grass, and I went in with a couple of green acrylographs just to add in some dimension and shadow and some like grassy squiggles just to make it more interesting. That wasn't part of my original plan, but I kind of got carried away on the first edition of this, and I ended up liking it so much that I brought it back when I ended up redoing my cover page. I wish these were the only mistakes that I had made in the setup. This was definitely the biggest, most extreme response to a mistake I had for this entire setup. Definitely one of the more extreme responses I've had to, it's not even a mistake, it just wasn't looking how I wanted it to look, which is why it kind of felt extreme to me, because normally I would just lean into it and say, it is what it is. But instead, exhaustion and frustration with having been sick for so long and being so late on the setup to the point where I I was writing on pieces of paper to keep my life together. I just did what needed to be done. And you know what? I'm happy with how it turned out in the end. So like I said, once the paint was dry, I went in with acrylographs and just added in some details to the grass. And there I'm adding in my marquee for October. And that is my setup for my cover page. Now I'm working on my calendar page. I kept this one a lot more simple. I still went a little bit extra on it and maximalist on it. So I used my distress inks to create a background, but it wasn't going to be as nitpicky as the lights and the marquee, which you'll see here. I'm cutting in my tabs, and like I mentioned, I use the acrylographs to color them in to kind of reinforce them a little bit more. And then I like to do the corner punches because I just feel like it ties in the pages with the rest of the corners of the notebook. Now I'm using sticky notes to mask off the middle portion of my calendar where the actual dates and the days are. And because I didn't want to be too concerned about getting ink in the middle of the calendar, I just ended up masking everything off completely. I probably picked a very excessive way of doing it. I could have just stuck down more sticky notes and used less. I don't know. This was just my thought process in the moment, so we're just going to go with it. And this is the second stencil I cut. Very basic stencil. It's just lines. I can't believe I don't have a stencil like that already, but it is what it is. I have one now. So I'm using a lighter purple, the Dusty Concord and the Distress Oxide ink for the background. And then I'm going in with the darker Villainous Potion, I believe, and with the stencil and just going over top of the stencil. I should have taped it down with a piece of washi tape like I ended up doing now because it was just easier than holding it in place and trying not to get ink all over my hands. And then, as always, adding in my borders. So I tend to use my bullet journal setups as a chance to practice my surface pattern design. And normally I do really like fussy prints or stuff like that, but it was kind of nice to lean into the more basic prints, so the stripes and the polka dots, and it was just fun to just play with color versus play with prints. So I'm using my Amy Tangerine alphabet stamp. I've linked a similar one down below that you can go check out. This one has been discontinued, unfortunately. Same with the Studio L2E stamp set, but again, I've linked something down below for you that you can go check out. And I use my Lumos pen in the size 1 tip to do my outlines and my borders and everything. And then what I'll do is I will either switch to the 0.3 tip or I'll use my Ren to do my notes for the month. Normally I use a black or a blue ink, but I might actually switch to a purple ink because it'll be fun to match this theme. So on the right hand side, I have a notes column where I capture just basic to-dos for the month. And then I added drips to the Amy Tangerine alphabet stamp set because I thought it would tie into the theme better and give it a more creepy Halloween feel. And as I mentioned earlier, I do create patterns for washi strips that I just print out and cut out with my silhouette. And I did a checkerboard pattern and then the marquee lights. So I still had the lights that was part of my initial design, but less fussy and a lot more doable in the time frame that I'd set out for myself. My next layout is my monthly overview page. This is where I capture important dates for the month and then goals that I want to work on and general focus. I decided to do a pattern behind the header as well. As you can see, there's a little bit of a mess up there where I ended up getting purple ink on this page. But I thought it would be fun to go in with the spiral again and just to tie those designs or patterns into each other throughout the entirety of the setup, including the individual weeks. So I'm using the orange to go in over top of the yellow, and I decided to add some black to it as well. It just gave it some extra dimension, and I actually really liked how it turned out with a little bit of the spiral or a little bit of the orange poking out from underneath. Now you are shortly going to see the third mistake that I made, and this mistake I didn't correct because, well, it just wasn't going to be worth the effort. Normally before I start stamping headings, I'll write it down so that I don't miss out on any letters. Well, I didn't do it this time and ended up skipping the L in monthly. Now, this mistake was so minor, and honestly, I've made it so many times before, and I didn't actually realize this mistake until after I'd finished the entire setup. So it is what it is. I went in and I added the drips, and that mistake is now going to live on in infamy. So this is the first of my clowns that you get to see. I absolutely love how they turned out. Each of them have a little weapon, and it's just perfect for Creepy Clown October. I'm now getting ready to do my first weekly layout. I ended up doing 5 weekly layouts, but I'm only sharing the one because a lot of my weekly layouts are the same. I just like to share how I incorporate the theme for the month into a layout that I absolutely love. This is the same weekly layout that I've been doing since January, I believe, but you can always easily incorporate a theme into the same layout. So one way I carried the theme over into every week was by creating a fun background in a little portion of the weekly setup. So in this case, I'm doing it behind my habit tracker, and I'm using red instead of purple like I did for my calendar page, and I'm just going in and adding the color. This was so fun, and I love having this pop of color on my page, and I feel like it ties in the theme perfectly without kind of making my weekly setup seem sterile. So this is mistake number 4. I put a J instead of an O. I don't know why, and so I ended up correcting this mistake by cutting out a piece of paper and gluing it over top. Now, initially, I didn't notice the J because you're going to see I almost stamped J again. It was another reason why I didn't like it, and so I was gluing over top of it. It just so happens that I made a bigger error than I realized. So it worked out that I wanted to fix it anyways. So basically, I have showed you the 4 ways that you can correct your mistakes. One is to color over top of it with the same color pen. So normally it would be a white paint pen. In this case, it was a sticker in the color of the background. You can tear out the page completely. You can ignore the mistake or glue a piece of paper over top of the mistake. There are many other ways to fix the mistake, but those are 4 that I have showcased in this video in my Halloween horror setup for October. So again, to tie my stamping into the rest of the theme, I added the drips to the main headers as well, so the O and the to-do. And then I have my to-do list, and there I stick one of my killer clowns. He is holding a pumpkin that has a cleaver sticking out of it. I had a lot of fun drawing them, and I was very proud of myself for drawing people under a tight deadline. It's definitely on my list of things I want to be better at, and so I'm going to say it was great to give myself this opportunity to work on it. And now I am doing the last page of this setup, which is my month in review page. And again, to the heading section, I'm adding the color, and I decided to just do some basic polka dots, which the sponge is round, and so I just added in polka dots. I give the stamp the same treatment with the drips, just using my Lumos pen. And so what I like to do on this page, I like to kind of, as it says, review the month, but just take some time and reflect on what the month was, what happened that month. I've been extremely fortunate the last few months. I've had some pretty cool stuff happen. And so this page has become to mean more to me because just to relive it in the moment, everything is so hectic and so stressful and happening so quickly, so that to be able to take the time to sit back and reflect on it kind of, solidifies the meaning of what happened. So this is my setup. Overall, it felt like it was a disaster, but looking at the final results, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you learned something in that nobody's setups are perfect. We all have our struggles and to just keep keeping on. Thank you so much for watching today. And for more bullet journal inspiration, you can check out one of these 2 videos. I'll see you over there.